our patterns. We believe that we are largely in control of what happens to us, that we create our own destiny. But we often encounter difficulties, and when we try to change our behavior, we get the same results because we end up doing things in exactly the same way. This is something that we all go through. The only problem is that it's very difficult for us to see our own patterns. We really have to examine ourselves. It's much easier to see this in our friends or our family. An example. You have a friend, and every time your friend breaks up with her boyfriend, she comes to you crying and she says, "I will never date a guy like that. He was such an asshole. He was the worst. I can't believe that I liked him. I can't believe that we were in a relationship together. He was so selfish. He was mean. He was rude." The next guy that I meet is going to be different. I'm going to make sure that I never end up in a relationship with a guy like that. And you, as her friend, say, "Yeah, I know. And then of course, the next time she calls you and she says, "Oh my God, I just met this guy. He's amazing. Let me introduce you to him." And when you meet her new boyfriend, you can see that she has picked exactly the same kind of guy. But she can't see it. She is running the same pattern again and again, and she doesn't realize it. She's choosing the same kind of guy who's selfish, who's rude, who's mean. And no matter what you tell her, if you tell her, "Oh my God, you just picked the same kind of guy," she will not believe you. She will say, "No, of course not. He's different. He's very different from the guy that I was dating before." And you will say, yeah, maybe. But you know she picked the same kind of guy. She's repeating that same pattern. And we all do this. We all can see the patterns of our friends much easier than seeing our own patterns. Melanie.
就是我们每个人都有一个习惯性的做事的模式，然后它是很难改变，就是我们会觉得自己下一次就不会那么做，就是我们不习惯于这个模式。就像之前我小明翻译的那个，大脑会有一个习惯性，越训练就会越强大的能力，于是我们这种模式就会一直习惯下去。举个例子，就是你有一个朋友，她每一次跟她男友分手的时候，她都会很伤心，然后说我下次绝对不会找这个样子的你，然后我也不会跟他复合的，下次的那个下一任绝对会不一样。但是当她带着她的新男友来见她的时候，你发现明明就是一种类型的，然后你告诉她你好像找的是前面还有就是她说她以前那个男友又自私，而不敢相信自己为什么会喜欢这样的人，但是她带着她下一任过来之后，你会发现还是同一种类型的，然后你就告诉她你找的好像还是跟上一任一个类型的，她会觉得不相信，她会说怎么可能你找的绝对是不一样的人，然后你就好吧，好了，是不一样的，然后就同意他。但是你会发现他这种恋爱模式会一次又一次的重复，这种仿佛历史总是惊人的像。所以就是说，我们都是习惯于某一种行为模式，而且你发现自己的行为模式是很容易的，就我们 能够更容易的去发现或者看到别人是怎么样习惯于这个模式，而很难看到自己总是这个样子。OK， 真的是。
We repeat the same decisions and deal with problems in the same way. This is a pattern that we all run. Another example. So, I have an ex-coworker, and we worked in the same company 10 years ago. We managed to keep in contact over the years, and we're still friends. I remember when I first met him 10 years ago and we worked for that same company, he always argued with our boss, and he would always talk about the boss behind the boss's back. He would tell me, you know, that our boss is such an asshole. Our boss is he's just so stupid. He always makes these mistakes. He doesn't know what he's doing. And my ex-coworker would end up arguing with the boss over and over and over again until eventually, a few months after we worked together, the boss just said, look, you cannot continue to work for our company. You can't get along with anyone. I need you. I'm asking you to leave our company. And so he got fired. It took him another month or two of looking for jobs that were suitable to his experience, and he found another job. And even though we didn't work for the same company anymore, we would go out for drinks and just catch up. I would tell him about how our company was going, and he would always ask me about the boss that he hated and some of the coworkers that he didn't like. And I would ask him about his new company. And he would always repeat a very similar pattern. He would always say, you know, this boss is kind of the same. I can't believe how stupid this guy is. He makes all these dumb decisions. He doesn't know how to work with people. And I always have to argue with him and try and correct him and give him advice which he doesn't like. Of course, 2 or 3 months later, I met him again and he said, yeah, I had to leave that company. He got fired, of course. I had to leave that company. He got fired again for a very similar reason. He argued with the boss, he argued with his coworkers, and the boss had to ask him to leave the company. A few months later, he decided to leave that city and move to another city. He found another job opportunity there. Same pattern. I spoke to him a year later and he told me a very similar story. It's always about the boss is stupid and he argues with the boss and he can't get along with his coworkers. And this has been a pattern that he repeats for years and years. He cannot find a job that he can stick to for more than a few months or more than a year. He always ends up disagreeing with people, causing these uncomfortable situations, and then having to run away from that company only to find another job and repeat the same pattern again. He deals with his problems in exactly the same way. He makes the same decisions. He will not learn from his patterns. That is his character. Melanie.
就是说，我们总是做着同样的决定，然后用着同样的方式去解决一些问题。然后举了一个很长的例子，就是他以前有个同事，然后呢在那里待一个公司待2到3个月，然后他总是在老板的背后说他的坏话，说他做这些决定很不对，然后呢又在那里和上司吵架，又各种其他同事还有当时老板合过来 然后最后他老板就炒他，之后再过2到3个月，他又去了另外一家公司，然后 Bob 跟他还是会有联系。然后先是他会不停的问 Bob 之前那个他不喜欢的老板和那些同事是怎么样的，然后 Bob 又问他的新公司怎么样，然后他用了一样的方式在那里说他的这个老板跟以前那个老板一样，不知道怎么和其他人沟通，然后也有不喜欢的同事，然后还有老板，然后再过2个3个月他又被炒了，然后又过了几个月，就他后面也去了其他公司，但是还是以同样的方式，就是与别人 argue， 就是总是与其他人争论，然后和别人合不来，所以还是被炒了。最后他决定离开这个城市，他又去了另外一个城市。1年之后，他又跟 Bob 就聊天，然后他还是用一样的方式和其他地方的公司的人合不来，和其他地方的老板吵架，然后他总是做了同样的错误，但他从来都没有意识到，最后就他没有办法改或者改，这样。我有个地方。OK。
There is a pattern to our lives, visible in our mistakes and failures. Our character compels us to act in certain ways beyond our awareness and control. Now, with that previous example, if my friend had decided to observe his character, the only way that he would have been able to see it and possibly to change it would be to look at his mistakes and failures and see that it was a repeating pattern. But what happens with a lot of people is that we don't want to see these things. We want to look outside us. We want to look at other people and blame them. We want to blame other people. We want to blame the situation. What we refuse to do is to honestly look at our patterns so that we can discover our character, so that we can then begin to change our character. Our character compels us to act in certain ways beyond our awareness and control. I want to focus on that bit, beyond our awareness and control. One thing, now we are going to look at the components of character, what makes up character, how is it that we all have different characters. But before we do that, I want to talk about something that we have already talked about before. Beyond our awareness, I want to look at the collective unconscious. I want to review that with you. You remember, the collective unconscious is something that influences every single person, as well as whole cultures, societies, and countries. It is something that has existed for thousands and thousands of years, possibly from the beginning of human beings, from the beginning of actual consciousness or ego. A short review of Carl Jung's work, right? This is just a short review of Carl Jung's work. And we've also talked about these archetypes. The archetypes are these almost like characters themselves, like personality traits inside the collective unconscious. And I just want to connect these ideas here. Why is it that people have certain kinds of character? One possible reason, in addition to the many that we're going to look at, is because of collective unconscious. Melanie.
就我 是超出我们的意识以及控制，因为我们很多时候是意识不到自己会重复的使用这种模式去犯同样的错误，所以和我们之前讲过的那个网课讲那个 pattern， 就是那个中文叫什么来着？就是集体无意识里面那个每个人有什么战士、法师、lover 那些，然后你们记得他们就跟我们的人格一样，它是一种趋势，然后所以来回答这种模式到底从哪来，很大一个原因应该就是集体无意识，它无形中就决定了我们会做什么样的决定，就是这样。OK。
Now let's look at the 3 components of character that are discussed in Robert Greene's book. Brief introduction. The first one would be genetics, the genes that we inherit from our parents or from our ancestors, our grandparents and their parents before them. Early childhood, our relationships that we have when we are between the ages of 2 and 7 years old, and the habits and experiences in our later years, the strategies that we use when we have developed a sense of self and when we have learned to interact with other people, probably from our teenage years onwards. Melanie.
有3种东西会组成我们的性格。第一个就是基因，我们在出生之前可能就如孕妇的那些行为也会影响到我们的一些性格。然后之后就是2到7岁的早期的童年，我们与家人的关系，然后我们是怎么样观察、学习家人组织的，也会影响你的性格。然后之后就是我们后面，特别是青年时代的习惯以及经历，会影响我们的性格。OK。
Let's look at genetics first. When we are born, we know that we inherit genes from our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents. And we know that these genes have influence on let's say, physical characteristics, how tall we might be, the color of our eyes, our hair, the color of our skin, our health perhaps. But there is research on how genetics might play a role in character, how it would influence character. An example here, let's connect some of the stuff that we've already looked at. We have talked about the big 5. We've looked at one of the traits, meaning extroversion. We've said that some people are very high in extroversion, some people are very low in extroversion. And it's not so obvious why. So one of the connectors here is that genetics are playing a role. You might inherit certain characteristics, perhaps a high level of extroversion or a low level of extroversion from parents or grandparents. Another one could be our levels of openness, our creativity, our ability to think differently or to think laterally. This could be another genetic factor. Another one is neuroticism, the negative, the ability to experience negative emotions. We notice that some people are more irritable, they easily get angry. Some people have genes that make them more prone to becoming depressed or having mood swings. There are interesting connections between how these factors are influenced, how our personality, the traits of our personality influence our character, and how we get them from our parents and our grandparents. There is a researcher named Melanie Klein who talks about extroversion being something that we inherit, and even the frequency, how easy it is for somebody to be depressed, being inherited from our parents or grandparents. Melanie.
所以刚才讲第一个就是基因影响我们的性格。首先，基因虽然会影响我们的外表，就是我们的眼睛的颜色，然后身形各种东西都是表象的，但是也有很多研究就是基因会影响我们的性格，比如很多时候你解释不了为什么这个孩子他天生就是外向的，或者是内向的，以及还有一些创造力啊，还有容易觉得忧郁，这些都是可能会遗传的。然后还有一个叫 Melanie 的人，他说啥来着？我当时脑袋一空，好像就是前面还说了一个是那个荷尔蒙是会让人觉得经常会觉得忧郁，然后如果你会发现你的外公或者以前的长辈或者父母都会有这些现象，然后你也有这种现象，对，这个好像也是那个原因。OK。
Early childhood. How is our character formed by our early childhood experiences? So there's a lot of research looking at the relationship between mothers and children and how children are influenced. Now, in the previous chapter, in one of the previous chapters, we have looked at these two concepts. One of them is called enmeshment. I'll do a short review. Enmeshment is where the parent is over involved in their child's life. As I mentioned earlier with Howard Hughes, his mother enmeshed him. She was overly involved. She was overly controlling. She made all of his decisions for him. She gave him no freedom, no independence. And on the other hand, we have abandonment. Now, of course, this can be where the parent decides to leave the family and the child never actually sees them. Or it could be in the case of Howard Hughes, where his father was just too busy and his father was always working and always traveling. And so the amount of time that he could spend with his father was very minimal. That's another form. That's a relationship between a parent and a child. So our early childhood experiences do have an influence on our character. So, related to early childhood and the influence on character, in his book, Robert Greene talks about a researcher named John Bowlby. John Bowlby has done a lot of research on the mother-child relationship and the influence on the child's future relationships. So let's say, for example, now, and John Bowlby has these different kinds of relationships between mother and child, which I'm not going to go too much in detail here, but I would like to look at some examples and what are the possible relationships, what are the possible effects on the character of the adult and how that might affect their relationships with, for example, their boyfriends or their girlfriends. So an example that John Bowlby, one of the kinds of relationships that John Bowlby talks about is the independent relationship, where the mother gives the child independence, allows the child to experiment, to make mistakes, but the mother does also protect the child. And based on this relationship, the child has the ability to form a healthy self, which then allows the child to have healthy relationships, to form healthy relationships with their boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife. Whereas when we look at relationships where the mother enmeshes the child, or perhaps the mother abandons the child, then we have different possibilities for when the child becomes an adult and is now looking to be in a relationship. Some possibilities are that the adult is unable to commit to the relationship, meaning that they will meet someone and date for a short amount of time, but they don't want to spend their life with anyone. They don't want to spend more than a certain amount of time with that person. They tend to break up and find somebody else, date for a short period of time, break up, find somebody else, or maybe they don't date. Maybe they just have a series of one night stand. They're constantly looking for new relationships because they don't know how, because part of their character, because of their relationship with their mother when they were a child, has set their character that way. Melanie.
OK，我说到了他观察小孩跟妈妈，小时候的相处方式到他长大的恋爱方式，所以第一种叫独立型的关系，就是他的母亲允许他犯错误，但是又有保护他，所以在他长大之后，他会有一个健康的自我，然后也会发展一个健康的恋爱关系。相反的话，就是如果有过度保护或者是隔离的话，那个孩子长大可能会，就是他会约会，但是他很难去持续一段很长的恋爱关系，或者就经常会有一夜情，或者不停的换对象的事情的行为。OK。
Another possibility here that is developed because of the mother-child relationship is where, as the child becomes an adult, possibly because the child was abandoned or the child had an abusive mother, or the mother was too controlling or too involved, or the mother would become involved sometimes and then would ignore the child and do the enmeshing abandonment pattern. Some children, they just, as they become older and now they are looking for relationships, some adults, they just feel anxious. They're always anxious in a relationship. They're always worried that their boyfriend or their girlfriend is going to break up with them, is going to leave them. And sometimes they will choose a partner who is not as intelligent as them or not as attractive as them, because that anxiety, because they can't accept this partner leaving them. So they will choose someone who they feel is a lower standard or is not as good as them, so that the person will never leave them. Melanie.
下很亲近，然后一下又疏远，或者是一直性的疏远，或者过度掌控他的孩子，反正各种暴力，就不正常的母子关系的话，长大他会经常在恋爱的时候感到焦虑，然后他会沉浸在这种状态之中。最后他可能会找一个没有他那么优秀的人来确保这个人永远都不会离开。OK。
And another pattern, yet another pattern with relationships here. Again, because of the mother-child dynamic in early childhood, some adults, they become attracted to someone, they become attracted to a man or a woman, and they will signal their attraction, and they will try and pursue a person. They will try and flirt. They will try to attract the person. They will try and make a person like them. But when the person becomes attracted to them, when the person shows that he or she is attracted to them and is interested and wants to start a relationship with them, they lose their attraction. They are no longer attracted when somebody else becomes attracted to them, and they need to move on and find somebody else who they are attracted to create that attraction. And as soon as that person becomes attracted to them, they lose attraction and they move on, and they repeat this pattern. Melanie.
有一种就是他长大之后，他会有一种恋爱模式，就是当他喜欢一个人的时候，他会向另外一个人发出信号，然后来表达他喜欢这个人的。但当另一方回应了他，也表示出我也是喜欢你，然后希望我们两个会继续发展关系，然后他就会突然的不喜欢就是他原本喜欢的这个人了，然后他就会转另外一个对象。但这个对象当另外一个对象也喜欢他的时候，他又会不喜欢这个人，他就会继续找那个他喜欢但又不喜欢他的人去追求。但是每当另外一个人他也喜欢这个人的时候，他就觉得他没有吸引力了，绕了这条路，他就追求。OK。
The third component is habits and experiences in our later years. Now, after that certain age, we develop strategies. We understand, and now here I'm going to connect to the concept of identity and persona, which we have also discussed. We accept that we cannot use the same character, we cannot be the same person, we cannot perform the same kinds of habits or actions with every person in every situation. We realize that we do have to change our character, we do have to change our identity, our persona in different situations with different people. We alter our character in situations where we feel stress. We alter our character in different environments, the home environment, the work environment. We alter our character to deal with certain kinds of people. Our boss, our teacher, our best friend, our boyfriend or girlfriend. We have the ability to change. We learn certain strategies and then we start to use these strategies. And often what happens is we have a limited number of strategies which we can use in different situations, and we repeat these similar, so each strategy is kind of like a pattern which we will repeat over and over again. Sometimes the strategies are useful, and sometimes the strategies are not great. But we tend to run these same patterns and we don't realize that they're not useful, they're not helping us. Melanie.
OK， 就是说我们之后的经历，后期的经历也会影响我们的性格嘛。然后它就像一种战略或者一种能力一样，我们面对不同的人，在不同的环境之中，会用自己的那个面具一样，会转换自己一个交流的模式，然后会用，就当我们感受不同，还有不同的情绪的时候，也会用不同的形式或者模式去与人相处，来融入这个环境之中，来融入这群人之中。但是事实上，我们的这些战略，就这种去转变我们交流方式，这种战略是有限的。然后我们总是有这几个战略，都在不同的场景下使用，有时候真的非常有用，就是你用对了地方的时候，但是有时候当没有用的时候，但你还是只有这几个战略，它就会重复的使用。OK。